A little bit about me. My name is Ben Hong. I'm a senior UI developer at Politico, and you can find me around all like the Internet of Things under the name Ben CodeZen. And I'm one of the co-founders of VueDC, which is the Vue.js-centric meetup here in the DC metro area. We move around Maryland, Virginia, and DC, so we don't just stay in one place. So if you're interested in Vue, want to come check out the community, please go ahead and come by. And I'm also just started up an initiative with the Vue.js community as well called Vue Meetups, which is centralizing all meetups within internationally. And so if you're looking for organizer support, resources, that's the place to go to check it out. So I don't know how many people have encountered this before, but I imagine most of you have joined a new project and you're there, you're asking for documentation, and whether it doesn't exist or worst case scenario, you're looking at an old README file that hasn't been updated in like 6 months, and so you spend hours trying to set up, and the next thing you know, you just wasted all this time. And so I'm sure a lot of you have encountered this before. And so the problem is that documentation can be difficult, but it really is key to any project's long-term success. As many of you know, when it comes to using any open source library, the number one thing you want to see is good documentation. So for getting set up, how to get using it. If you encounter, people will immediately drop their usage of libraries the moment it starts getting too difficult with documentation. So most of you are familiar with documentation format like your open source README. So your basic documentation, you expect it to have basic description of what the library does, getting set up, requirements, instructions, how you might be able to contribute, and possibly how to deploy, for example. While this is great, eventually with companies, you want something that's more enterprise level. You want something that can maybe go beyond the code base that you're using. So for those that have the joy of using Atlassian, I'm sure some of you have encountered Confluence. And while it does have a lot of bells and whistles, it starts out really well-intentioned as far as being able to search and keep everything in one place. But it honestly provides this additional barrier between developers and their documentation, because now they have to open a brand new site. They use different tools from what they're used to as far as Markdown and those sort of things. And at the end of the day, a lot of times, by the time people get their hands on it, it looks a little bit more like this. And it's like a marketing page, and it's really hard to just figure out where everything is. And then on top of this, you've usually divorced your code from your documentation, and that's just an additional barrier that's really not necessary. So how do we solve this? We're developers, and usually the solution is okay, let's just build our own. But then that has its problems too, right? Because now you're starting to get into discussions regarding, what tech stack do you use? Or, do we React? Do we use Jekyll, static site? How about the design? Do teams want to have input as far as how it looks? What's the responsive design look like? Features? Is it actually going to be easy to maintain? And frankly, who's going to pay you to actually do this, right? We're developers, so we're paid to ship features, not document things. And so there's always this constant battle. And so a lot of times documentation, just like testing, gets left to the wayside. And so, we end up in this scenario where you're constantly debating how to document as opposed to actually documenting. And so, eventually we get to this place where we're these cynical people who think documentation is this pipe dream. It's never going to happen. Just, and best thing you can do is find someone who's worked on the project, ask them questions, and good luck from there. So to my point, living in good documentation can be difficult to do for those reasons. There's a lot of obstacles that can impede you from doing it. And so today you're here to talk about VuePress. So what is VuePress? It's a static site generator with a Vue-powered theming system that comes with a default theme that's optimized for technical documentation. Now, most of you are aware there are a lot of static site generators out there, but the kicker here is that this product has been built specifically for technical documentation. And I'll show you more about the theme shortly. First off, to what I was saying earlier, it provides this incredible default theme that allows you to focus on what you actually need to do, which is documentation. So I'm going to open up a sample site that I started. Whoop, where did I go? OK. So as far as the features goes, you can see right here, this is a basic VuePress template. On your homepage here, you have your basic hero, your title, your page description, a call to action, basic columns to describe some features. And as far as what that looks like from a code perspective, it's just this. It's just a YAML front matter. You type, you focus. Again, the key focus here is your content. Whatever you write in here will automatically then, what happened? Oh, I know what happened. Sorry, I did not keep this running. Okay. As you can see here, whatever you can focus on writing documentation, and it looks great. So you have a home page. So this is optional that you can turn on. Navigation bar, right up here. This is entirely configurable. All it is a basic JSON object. It's an array. You can define the path, the text that's in there. You can define if you want any resources in there. So subsections, those sort of things, all taken care of for you. And the navigation, also completely responsive as well. And then in addition, Sidebar. One of the things that we often, I found myself doing a lot of times is that you have long documentation, but you want to be able to generate a sidebar that allows people to track what you're actually doing. As you can see here, the active tab is actually following you down. And all you have to do in this scenario is you just tell it to automatically generate your sidebar for you, sidebar auto. And all that is just magic. It'll scrape all your headings, H1, H2s, H3s. You can determine which levels you want to go down to, but it does the first 3 by default. And then, again, automatically generates that architecture for you, which is awesome. Built-in search. This is huge. As you can see here, there's a search bar up here. If I type in here, it actually has basic autocomplete. And again, it scrapes all your headings. So the moment I decide to hit any of these, it'll actually navigate me to my page. And as far as how this has worked, there's no backend, no database. All it's doing is at compile time, it'll scrape through all your headings and generate essentially a file that will allow it to run this autocomplete. But this makes discovery actually a lot easier too, because now you don't have to worry about people diving into certain sections, certain headings. Everything is available to you with this search autocomplete. Again, right out of the box, nothing you need to do additional to have that work. And then if you want your GitHub repository as well. So in your config, you can actually set your GitHub for this particular documentation product. And then it will go ahead and automatically generate the, what happened? Why did it not work? Okay, it's supposed to generate a GitHub link, but I wonder why it's not doing that right now. Okay. All right, hopefully it'll come back to it. Last updated and edit links. So let me just show you a different VuePress site to show you what I mean. So you can actually configure it to actually track the last edited as well for the page. So you can see here, if I scroll all the way to the bottom, there are actually 2 different links. One, which allow you to directly open a GitHub issue or actually issue a PR for that page. Again, it automatically tracks all this based on your file structure, and it knows with your GitHub repository how everything works. And as you can see here too, you also automatically get your last updated date too. All this you get built in just by telling it whether you want your edit links to be configured, and you just give it a string for last updated text. And you get all those features. Secondly, so as you can see, it leverages technologies and languages that developers are already comfortable with. So the things you need to know to use VuePress, if you can run npm scripts, so npm install, npm run dev. If you understand Markdown syntax, and you know Git, that's all there is to it. There's nothing else, which again, the key thing here is that you can focus on writing the documentation and getting what you need up and running. It also contains a lot of built-in Markdown extensions that are optimized for technical documentation. So some of those examples, so we have, for example, this is not necessary for documentation necessarily, but you can see, so emojis, so here, so let me do cool snippets. So if I paste this into a file, let's do the basic, drop it in here. Is it not running? Sorry about that, hang on a sec. Yep, it's running. There you go, okay. All right, now you have the GitHub link that I was showing you earlier that you configured. But to my point, so you can see here, using your basic Slack emoji syntax, it's working. Again, right out of the kit, no additional configuration. YAML front matter, which you saw. So when you're configuring your page, there are times where you want to configure like the SEO piece of it. And so with each individual page, you can actually define its own front matter, and these meta tags will automatically be generated based on what you have here with no additional work. GitHub style tables. So again, for those that like to use the Markdown syntax for tables, this you get for free as well. You can see it's already designed, looks good. And then we have code syntax highlighting. And for those that have to try to configure this before, it can be kind of complicated as far as decision paralysis. You want to figure out, OK, what kind of highlighting do I want? What kind of theme do I want? Well, again, this all works out of the box without any additional work on your end. And if you want inline code syntax highlighting as well, that's a piece of cake as well. 4, 6, you can establish what lines they are, and it automatically does that for you. Really, really straightforward. And then finally, custom containers. There are a lot of times when you're documenting, you want to have flags just to give people sort of a heads up as to what's going on. And so one of the things they came up with, which is a great Markdown syntax here, as you can see here, they have these custom containers for you, whether tips, warnings, or dangers. And they've already thought this through as well. You can actually customize what this says here if you want, and it'll pass in an entirely different label. So again, all these APIs, they've been designed to make your life easier to create documentation, which, again, Evan Yu has been doing a phenomenal job at. And so finally, every page generated by VuePress has its own pre-rendered static HTML. So from a performance standpoint, it loads really quickly, and it's SEO friendly, as you can saw. You can add your meta tags and whatever you need. It's all there waiting for you. But there's one more thing. As I mentioned earlier, VuePress is a static site generator that's optimized for technical documentation. But the one thing I failed to, or intentionally left out, is that it has a Vue-powered theming system. Now, for those in the audience, how many people are proficient at Vue.js in the audience? Gotta raise the hands. OK, so we got a few. All right, so I'm going to essentially give like a bit high-level overview for those that haven't worked with Vue or client-side frameworks. And so Vue essentially is a progressive framework for building user interfaces. And the main thing that separates it from its competitors is that it's designed from the ground up to be incrementally adaptable, meaning you choose what you want and when you want to use it. To quote Sarah Drasner, she says, one thing I love about Vue is that it gives you what you want and then gets out of your way. So as you can see here from the State of JS survey from 2017, for those, it might be kind of small for some of those in the back. So basically, the gray section means that they've never heard of it. Light yellow, I've heard of it, not interested. Bright yellow, I've heard of it and would like to learn it. And then the light purple is I've used it before, wouldn't use it again. And dark purple, I've used it before, and I would use it again. As you can see here, React is clearly the #1 as far as current users. But as you can see here, Vue.js is actually the #2 as far as current users, in addition to the fact that there is a huge number of people who are interested in getting involved with Vue. So as far as client-side frameworks, Vue.js is definitely one of those up-and-coming frameworks to definitely keep an eye out for. And so there are 3 core Vue.js features you need to understand. And so the first is declarative rendering. As you can see here, it uses handlebar syntax to do this interpolating. And as you can see, we have a very simple Vue instance here with the data for conference. And then by using the handlebar syntax, it automatically outputs hello DevFestDC. Very straightforward. And then directives. This is kind of the more magical piece of Vue. What they do is they extrapolate very common scenarios that you might use as a developer when building your UI. And they've created these sort of syntactic sugar pieces that are prefixed with the V. So in this particular code snippet, you'll notice that the list has a V-4 directive. And what that's doing is, for those that aren't familiar with JavaScript, is it's looping through the array that you have in languages and outputting an LI for each one. And so for those that used to do HTML by hand, you could remember when we used to have like 50 li elements, and editing those were a pain. Like if you wanted to modify the class or different things, like it was very difficult to do. With things like this, as you can see, all I have to do is edit it in one place. It'll propagate out everywhere that I need it to. And so this is one of the things that makes working with Vue particularly easy. Third thing is that it has single file components. And so as you can see here, in this single file, you have your HTML template, your JavaScript, and your CSS all in one file. And the beauty of this is that it encapsulates everything in one file, which allows for true modular architecture, in the sense that, in the past, for those that work with CSS, you know that side effects have been a big issue. And when you delete a file, partials helped a little bit, but it was hard to tell what was touching what. With single file components, you know that once you delete this file, the Markdown's gone, the JavaScript's gone, the CSS is gone. And that's definitely a game changer as far as being able to manage your UI component library. And so, with that said, and so single file components can be used within each other as well. So you see in this particular instance, the simple component we built in the first one can just be included as a tag within your template, which allows for easy reuse and also reduces the clutter of your templates as well. And so at the end of the day, the way I like to say is that Vue is the most compassionate framework right now in the market, and it's because it allows you to choose what's best for you and or your team. As you can see earlier, it uses HTML for its HTML, CSS for its CSS, and JavaScript, as opposed to things like JSX, which obviously force people to have really high competency in JavaScript. You're sort of you're making it hard for designers who might only know HTML and CSS to get involved with your project, whereas Vue, as you can see, allows a base language, but in addition, if you want to use JSX, it does allow you to do that. You just have to configure it. And so, to what I said earlier, it is incrementally adoptable and has a lot of guidelines that you can follow. But again, this is one of the reasons why I think Vue has become the up-and-coming framework within the front-end community. So as far as VuePress go, what does this have to do with VuePress? So as I mentioned before, there's a Vue-powered theming system. And so what this means, though, is that you can use your Vue in Markdown. So whether it's interpolation, so if we come back here, I can come back in here, and then we can let's just write some math. And what you'll see is it can actually interpolate those things. More importantly, you can get access to site and page data. And so during development, you'll notice that, let me pull it to the side. VuePress is actually rendering creating a Vue instance, and so you actually get access to all these site variables that allow you to then reuse it throughout your page. So in the instance, you can also reuse your front matter as well. So in this particular instance, if I wanted to go ahead and say let's reuse organization org name, and let's just call it let's just call it Ben. I can actually then access the page variable front matter org name, and this appears as you would expect, which means that as you reuse it throughout your application and your pages, you now only have to change it in one place in order. Again, it just makes your life heck a lot easier. The reuse is incredible. So, and again, it accesses even up to the site level. So again, this is just the Vue dev tools for those who aren't familiar. As you can see, you can inspect and you get access to all these things as you're going through and writing your documentation, which is pretty incredible from simplifying your workflow. Again, directives work in here as well. So in the event you want to interpolate something, you want to loop through something, you can do that right here as well. And you can see you have your list right there. And what's probably the most impressive of all is you can actually use your single file components within your Vue files. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and create a basic counter component that will just increment and decrement. So let's do this real quick. Let's just do the increment, actually. Okay. And so here, I've created the single file component that you've seen earlier. And then if I reuse it within here, all I have to do without any import statements or anything, I can create multiple instances of the single file component. And this allows you then, and they each have their own state, and you can do all sorts of really cool things with it. And so this now gives you a bit of dynamic functionality within your page that was once just plain Markdown, which I think hugely extends your ability of what you can do. And so as far as getting started, on the left here you have the VuePress documentation that you be sure to check out. And then I have a starter kit on my Ben Kozen GitHub, so feel free to download that and clone it. So yep, I'll let some people take some pictures. Okay. Yeah, and so with that said, that's your high-level overview of VuePress, which actually just was released like a few weeks ago, so you guys are pretty up to date as far as tooling goes. Any questions regarding Vue or VuePress? Yeah. I think it's still in 0.0. Oh, so the question was whether VuePress works with Bitbucket as well. I believe it does. I think you just have to give it a hard URL. Like you notice, I just use like I think it defaults to GitHub, but you could probably point it to Bitbucket. So that's, and then if not, I'm sure someone's working on configuring that right now because they're not technically on 1.0 yet. But again, the nice thing about VuePress, which I like a lot, is you can keep it close to your code. And then this allows you, again, to kind of just keep everything in one place, and it's version controlled. So again, sort of everything a developer could want. Yeah? Sure. Yeah.
Forgetting about the things that I'm not using and the stuff that I've reused.
Uh-huh.
Is there any sort of like link dependency among those components?
Link dependency. So essentially, like if you're not using a component, like to clean it out, or no, I don't think there's any default method that automatically detects whether or not. But the JavaScript the Webpack will bundle together what you're actually like dependent on, so that you're not shipping code that you're not actually using. So in that regard, it does save you from that. But I don't think there's anything that automatically cleans your source code from that regard. Yeah. Any other questions about VuePress? Okay. Oh yeah, good. VuePress? I want to say VuePress has been out less than a month. Yeah, so there's a brainchild of Evan Yu who was just like, I want to create documentation for my side projects. And the one thing, again, I forgot to mention is that, again, this is totally free, open source. So it's great for any initiatives that you have, helps you get up and running. So yeah, him and a couple people just shot it out. And so there's still some things to come as far as plugins for blogging and stuff. But again, for technical documentation, they really knocked it out of the park for this one. Honestly, I mean, I'm shipping it on live sites, so like VueMeetup.org. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from making it production ready, because really, again, all you're doing is shipping documentation. So there's not gonna be like dependencies on your documentation library. So yeah, I would totally recommend using it on production right now.